Behc Jax-Lynx in conversation with Tierney and Kaeden Seburn. I'm asking Kaeden and Cara the question, can a teacher, educator, or social worker know if a student is transgender or gender diverse based on outside appearance, their gender expression? Can you guys just introduce yourselves and your pronouns?
Yeah, I'm Kaeden Seburn, and I use they, them, or he pronouns.
Tierney, I use they, them pronouns.
Awesome. So we have Cara in the rocking chair and young Kaeden in on the floor. Okay, so thank you all. And we're in Ottawa, Ontario, before Kaeden and I get ready to go across Ontario and into Manitoba, kind of just meeting, connecting with people. One of the conversations that we're having a lot is do educators, and more specifically educators who are in high schools, do they always know if a student is trans or gender diverse? Can a teacher just look at a student and know this? And how does a teacher or an educator or a principal know if they have a trans student in the school? Question one. And question two, do all trans and gender diverse students come out in the same way? So I'll just sort of open that up to both of you to respond.
Sure. You wanna hit it first, or?
Sure. Well, I definitely don't think that teachers or other staff in schools necessarily know when there's trans kids in the school. I think that people's coming out narratives are different for different people for a lot of different reasons, and some people definitely come out at school and let all of their teachers and other school staff know, but a lot of people also don't for different reasons. They might be out with their friends, or they might be out at home or in other spaces, or they might not be. But a lot of people don't necessarily feel the need to make a big announcement to all of their teachers, or they might try to come out at school, but teachers might not necessarily understand what that means.
Yeah. I think like the question extends well beyond schools, and we actually never know if someone is trans just by looking at them or spending time with them. This is something very personal that a trans person will communicate if they feel safe and able to do that. More importantly, people who are in high school, people who are in elementary schools, probably haven't actually accessed the language and the ideas to be able to articulate and identify themselves in the nuanced ways that they need. So, a trans student in high school might just look like an angry teen, and a lot of teens are angry for a lot of reasons, so they blend right in, and often the pressure to conform to a lot of societal expectations is very powerful. So no, profs, administrators, principals, social workers can't walk in and just sort of pick out who might be trans or not be trans in a high school or on the street corner.
Totally. And I think that a lot of the time, like teachers and other school staff assume that there aren't any trans students because no one has come forward and like announced to the school administration that they're trans. But like, I would say that most people don't do that. Like when I was in high school, I had lots of other friends in my school who were trans, and a few of us were out to the school administration, but the majority of people were not. And especially if there's no one else who's already come out as trans, even if you do have the language and the resources, which a lot of people don't, even if you do have those things and you do identify yourself as trans and have that kind of language and the resources to be able to do that, that doesn't necessarily mean that the people around you do or that your school does, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a safe place for you to be able to come out.
Yeah, dominant messages in society generally focus on transgender identities as being sort of tragic and painful experiences. So, there aren't many safe circumstances in which trans youth can come out safely and feel like it's going to be embraced and celebrated in the way that it really should be. It's an exciting part of understanding who we are, and more often than not, we're met with frowns and confusion, when really it should be like, wow, this is amazing. You've got this figured out. Now let's make sure that this world is safe and supportive for you to move through.
Yeah, definitely.
Katie, you talked about earlier when we were chatting that the ways that you felt comfortable were because you had seen other students a few years earlier come out. I was wondering if you could just say your name and the year that you graduated high school so people could have a context of that, and then to talk about what enabled you to be able to come out, and then what may have prevented you from coming out?
Yeah, so my name is Kaeden and Seburn, and I graduated in 2017. Yeah.
Aw, baby, 2017.
Yeah, there was, like, my school was in sort of like the downtown core of an urban area in Ottawa, and there's been students that were out as trans for a few years before I came out, not for a long time, but I definitely knew of other students who had come out in their classes and to their teachers and other staff in the school as trans before I had. And that's definitely like a big part of the reason that I decided to actually come out at school. I was out to my friends and in like social spaces sort of at school, like with my friends at school and like a club that I was in at school, but I was out in those spaces for almost a year before I came out in my classes and to my teachers, mostly just because that was a much more intimidating thing to do, and also because like you don't really spend that much time interacting with your teachers. So it was more important to me to like be able to have those spaces to hang out with my friends, and for my friends who I like knew better and had more of a relationship with to understand. It wasn't as important to me to be able to be out in my classes, but yeah, I knew of other students that had come out in the school before me, and I knew kind of like vaguely the path that had taken for them. So I knew like what they'd done to change their name in the school system and how they communicated that kind of information to their teachers. And I also knew the head of the guidance department, who I felt comfortable talking to about that, and like talking to her about sending emails to my teachers and things like that. So without those things, if I hadn't known of other students that had already been out, or if I hadn't like already known the people that I needed to talk to send those emails and make those changes in the system, I don't think that I would have decided to do it, at least not at the time that I did.
Awesome. Cara, thank you, Kaeden. Cara, you also just shared a really sweet story about your first day of class.
So in terms of what I do as a prof, now I get to stand in front of a classroom of students at the beginning of every semester in a university, and I stand there and I say, my name is Cara Tierney. I use they, them pronouns, and until I know who you are and what your pronoun is, I'm going to use gender neutral language to speak to everybody, because I can't assume based on your name or the way you look how you might identify. And until you come and introduce yourself to me, and I'd love to meet you, so please do come and say hi and share your pronoun. I'm just going to play it safe and, you know, keep it neutral. So I did this last night. I had my first introduction to art history class, where I welcome all these young artists and art historians, and I gave this story. I showed them some artwork to give them a sense of who I am and where I'm coming from, because they're going to have to be with me for 13 weeks for 3 hours a week. And I asked them also to like write nameplates. I do want to get a sense of who's in my classroom and where they're coming from. And I also share my artwork, because my artwork has been this sort of systematic deconstruction of my gender identity, and it's a powerful tool now to be able to use to talk about gender identity. And it also shifts the focus away from my body and onto this artwork, where we can all look at this sort of third thing in the room and not necessarily feel the like heightened anxiety or pressure about having to talk about, you know, my body, your body, what does this mean for me, what does this mean for you? We can just look at this cool piece of art and talk about it through that. So I showed an artwork where after my top surgery, my double mastectomy, I had my breast matter cremated, and I photo documented that process. And so the photographs really are the contracts between myself and the hospital, between myself and the funeral parlor, the tubs that I got when I went to the hospital and picked up those breasts. They were they gave me 2 cardboard boxes. Each box had a tub wrapped in a plastic bag, and so yeah, I picked up these boxes, and I told this story to my students, and you know, in a group of 80 people who are all strangers to each other, they've just met like within days. This kid shoots up his hand and is like, wow, you did that? That's amazing. When I had my top surgery, I asked the surgeons, like, can I have my breast back? And they said no. And this really kind of floored me in the moment and thrills me to bits, because that kid was so confident and empowered in that moment and had absolutely no hesitation outing themselves to a room of 80 strangers. It surprised me because of their ability to speak so freely about who they are and how they move through the world, in a world that historically has not made that space and has not affirmed our identities to the degree where we feel that sense of security. And then shortly after that, we took a break because it's a long class, and they ran over And another student came over, and both of them, you know, introduced themselves really excitedly. And the one said, you know, oh, congrats about your top surgery. And I congratulated them back. And they said, I have so many questions, but I want to talk, but maybe this isn't the place. And then the one who came up after, you know, he was like, oh, you know, I'm a trans man too. And it's so amazing to see this like a trans adult and a professor, because, you know, I look around and there aren't many, so it's just amazing to have like this elder in my community. And just right then and there I was like, what, you know, elder status. And I think that's only something the youth can confer on me, and I really it was touching. And it's just like that I've become a trans elder, apparently. Won't take it too seriously, but it was very sweet. And it certainly, you know, echoed my experience of coming out, and my experience, and what Kaeden was saying, you know, seeing those people before us who are taking those chances, who are living their true selves and being courageous in the spaces that aren't open to us, and taking the chances to like say those things. You know, when I introduce myself and I say they, them in a classroom of 80 students, I know that there are people in that crowd that aren't receptive, and I do it nonetheless. And even though there is a bit of fear that accompanies that gesture every time, but I'm not necessarily doing it for myself, I'm doing it for those two kids, so they can jump up and come over and feel empowered and excited in that moment, and feel like they have access to that space of learning, which is really important. Because I've been there for a few years, and this is, you know, there's been a really rapid change in those few years.
Amazing. Thank you both so much.
You can find me at caratierney.com or on Facebook, or come study art history at the University of Ottawa. I might be there teaching. Yeah, lots of places. I'm easy to find. Yeah.
Kaeden?
Yeah, Seburn.com has all the info about our tour as well. Yeah, various other places on the internet.
Awesome. Super. Thank you both so much. Good night.
Good night.